Unbeknownst to almost everyone is the fact that no one in all of human history has ever proven the Earth moves in space. Let's say that again in case you didn't catch it the first time. Neither Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Einstein, nor anyone else has ever provided the world with proof that the Earth either spins on an axis or revolves around the sun. Surprising? It should be, since we are all taught from childhood that the Earth revolves around the sun as sure as birds fly in the sky and fish swim in the sea. Most everyone is familiar with the story of Galileo. We are taught that Galileo was an honest man of science, always searching for the truth. Often that description fits him well. He gave us many useful ideas and inventions. One of the more famous experiments commonly attributed to Galileo is the dropping of two differently weighted balls from the Tower of Pisa, where he watched them fall to the ground in the exact same time. In one brief moment, history was changed. Aristotle's version of motion, which claimed the heavier ball would drop faster, came to a screeching halt, and our view of the world was never the same. Hence, we are grateful to Galileo for his contributions to science, although for the record we must state that there were several scientists before Galileo who had experimented with different weighted objects and found that they fell to Earth at the same rate. We must also say that it was Galileo's friend, Vincenzo Vivani, who attributed the Pisa experiment to Galileo when it was actually Vincenzo Ranieri, a professor at Pisa, who had written to Galileo on March 13, 1641, about the experiments from Pisa.
We also thank Galileo for showing us that the moon, contrary to Aristotle's idea, had a rough surface. For showing us that Venus, contrary to Ptolemy, had full phases that could be seen from Earth. And for showing us that Jupiter had moons circling it. Perhaps, if in Galileo's time we were faced with such evidence, we would be tempted to conclude the Earth was not the center of the universe, and, in fact, revolved around the much larger Sun, just as smaller moons revolved around the larger Jupiter.
But as any scientist must admit, science is science because it does not rest its conclusions on hypotheses, conjecture, prejudiced, highly valued, or sanctimonious opinions. It must be based on experimental facts. But facts, as we shall see, are not so easy to come by, especially in Galileo's time when sophisticated scientific instruments did not exist. Despite Galileo's protestations to the contrary, the historical record reveals that he had no scientific proof for his controversial assertions about a revolving and rotating Earth. What he thought was proof in his day would be summarily dismissed out of science classrooms today. Galileo merely began a myth that would eventually take on a life of its own and become the status quo of popular thinking. Few are aware that a year before he died, Galileo renounced, quite dramatically, all his claims that the Earth went around the sun. In 1641, his colleague Francesco Rinuccini had written a letter to Galileo claiming that the astronomer Giovanni Perioni, by discovering a case of stellar parallax, had proven that the Earth moves. Galileo, who by this time had experienced a dramatic conversion back to the Christian faith 2 years earlier in 1639, wrote the following letter back to Rinuccini later in 1641.
The falsity of the Copernican system should not in any way be called into question. Above all, not by Catholics, since we have the unshakable authority of the sacred scripture, interpreted by the most erudite theologians, whose consensus gives us certainty regarding the stability of the earth, situated in the center, and the motion of the sun around the earth. The conjectures employed by Copernicus and his followers in maintaining the contrary thesis are all sufficiently rebutted by that most solid argument deriving from the omnipotence of God. He is able to bring about in different ways, indeed, in an infinite number of ways, things that, according to our opinion and observation, appear to happen in one particular way. We should not seek to shorten the hand of God and boldly insist on something beyond the limits of our competence.
Rinuccini was so disturbed by the letter that he attempted to erase Galileo's signature from off the last page. The editor of Galileo's letter states,
"The signature Galileo Galilei has been very deliberately and repeatedly rubbed over, with the manifest intention of rendering it illegible."
Stillman Drake, one of the premier Galileo historians of our day, states,
"Among all Galileo's surviving letters, it is only this one on which his name at the end was scratched out heavily in ink. I presume that Rinuccini valued and preserved Galileo's letters, no matter what they said, but did not want others to see this declaration by Galileo that the Copernican system was false, lest he be thought a hypocrite."
What was it that made Galileo change his mind? After nearly 4 decades of supporting the Copernican system, why did he come to believe that it was inferior to the geocentric system? We will see that the scientific and historical facts uncovered in this documentary may have something to do with Galileo's sudden change of heart. Since by his letter to Rinuccini it appears that Galileo recused himself from the debate, we can no longer lay the burden on him. It is solely on the shoulders of modern science, for modern science claims to possess the sophisticated instruments that Galileo lacked to prove the Earth moved. Truth be told, it is a fact that 400 years later, modern science has also failed to provide the human race with proof that the Earth is moving. As one honest scientist put it in a book endorsed by Albert Einstein in 1948,
"We can't feel our motion through space, nor has any physical experiment ever proved that the Earth actually is in motion."
As we will see, modern scientists freely admit that heliocentrism, the system which has the Earth rotating on its axis and revolving around the Sun, is merely their preferred model of cosmology, and their preference for it is made purely on philosophical grounds, not scientific ones. Although various scientists and historians have certainly made it appear to the modern mind as if many and varied proofs exist for a moving Earth, in reality, modern science is actually covering up the fact that it has no proof for its cherished view of cosmology. As Albert Einstein himself once admitted, reliance on the doctrine of Copernicus is not nearly as strong as we were once led to believe. Einstein writes,
"Since the time of Copernicus, we have known that the Earth rotates on its axis and moves around the Sun. Even this simple idea, so clear to everyone, was not left untouched by the advance of science."
Stephen Hawking, the next most famous physicist after Einstein, said something very similar.
So which is real, the Ptolemaic or the Copernican system? Although it's not uncommon for people to say that Copernicus proved Ptolemy wrong, that is not true. As in the case of our normal view versus that of the goldfish, one can use either picture as a model of the universe. For our observations of the heavens can be explained by assuming either the Earth or the Sun to be at rest.
Similarly, a world-class physicist currently living in England, Julian Barber, stated in his recent book, Absolute or Relative Motion, the following.
Thus, even now, 3.5 centuries after Galileo's condemnation by the Inquisition, it's still remarkably difficult to say categorically whether the Earth moves.